Salvation is all about the grace of God. This was the last word in our last session, and it's the first word in discipleship. But how should God's grace affect us, completely impacting every part of our lives? Welcome back to Multiply, and we're continuing this second session where we left our first, looking at discipleship as a gift of God through salvation. Accepting the truth of the gospel is the beginning of discipleship. But how do we live as disciples? That's the topic for today. Now, while discipleship is a simple concept, it's not easy. Paul writes in Romans 10, "If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." Sounds simple, right? But have you ever thought about what the word Lord means? We sometimes think of it as another name for God, but it is actually a title. It refers to a master, an owner, or a person who's in position of authority. Workers would refer to their employer using this word, as would servants of a household. Jesus frequently used parables describing our relationship with God in this way. The owner of the vineyard, the forgiving master, the wicked servant, the servant ready for his master's return. So just take a minute to think this through. Do you really believe that Jesus is your master? That he has intentions for you, commandments and instructions that you should carry out? More than that, do you believe that he is your owner? That you actually belong to him? Paul is so bold as to tell us that you're not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. The same Lord who by his grace sets us free from sin and death now owns us. We belong to him, and he calls us to live in obedience to his rule. Many people want to confess that Jesus is Lord, yet they don't want to believe that he is their master or submit to his authority. Do you see the obvious contradiction in this? The call to be a disciple of Jesus Christ is open to everyone, but we don't get to write our own job description. If Jesus is Lord, then he sets the agenda. If Jesus Christ is Lord, then your life belongs to him. He has a plan, an agenda, and a calling for you. You don't get to tell him what you'll be doing today or for the rest of your life. Don't get the impression that following Jesus is all about joyless sacrifice. More than anything else, following Jesus boils down to two commands, which he said were the most important commandments in the Old Testament law. Get them in Matthew 27, verses 37 to 40. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. All comes down to love. In his first letter, Peter expressed it well for people like us, people who didn't see Jesus on earth but follow him nonetheless. He said, "Though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory." Following Jesus is not centered around diligently keeping a set of rules or trying to sum up the moral willpower to lead good lives. It's not about finding an inner strength that's somehow buried inside us waiting to get out. It's about loving God and enjoying him. It's about this relationship with our Master, spending our time with him, spiritually connecting with him and enjoying being in his presence. In case we think that we can love God and live any way we want to, Jesus told us very clearly, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. The love for God is the first commandment, and it's made practical in the love for our neighbours in the second commandment. In John's first letter, he builds on this picture of love for God being equal with obedience to Jesus' instructions, and that it's impossible to do one without the other. He says, if anyone obeys God's word, love for God is truly made complete in them. 1 John 2 verse 5. Or whoever does not love one another does not know God, because God is love. 1 John 4:8. And then if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. It's 1 John 4:12. For whoever does not love their brother and sister who they have seen cannot love God who they've not seen. 1 John 4:20. See, our love for God is made complete in our love for our neighbours. And when we understand love in this light, it's not difficult to understand that love for God and obedience to Jesus Christ cannot be separated. God's love changes us from the inside out and redefines every aspect of our lives. But true love for God is displayed by imitating God's love for us, which is ultimately demonstrated through Jesus. By this we know love, that he has laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. The only logical implication from John's words here are that we also lay down our lives for God and for our brothers and sisters. But what John implies, Jesus spells out loud and clear. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus teaches clearly that we must count the cost to be his disciples. These words were not said just for the first disciples, but for every disciple afterwards. And that includes us. Let's just read them together. Great crowds accompanied him. He turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will mock him, saying, this man began to build but was not able to finish. Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he's able with 10,000 to meet the one who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is still a great way off, he'll send a delegation and ask for terms of peace. So therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Now, Jesus very clearly uses some of these specific teaching techniques as he doesn't really want us to hate our parents. But of course, the method is strange to us, and the message is clear. To be Jesus' disciple, we must love him. Must love God above everything else, our family, our friends, our possessions, our jobs, our interests, even our own lives. So as we break into discussion groups, have in mind that this is for our good. God's desire is that we release our dependence on created things and we grow in dependence on our Creator and grow deeper in our relationship with him.